Hello, everyone. I know we still have 5 minutes, so do not worry, but I'm done scarfing my lunch down, so I figured I'd come on and actually say hey to everybody. So to those who just joined or who are joining, obviously we are going to let the full 5 minutes till 1 Eastern roll around to give everyone some time. I've been able to chat with so many strength coaches and nutritionists over the last couple of days and weeks that we've had this up, and obviously we understand that the life of a strength coach and a sports nutritionist is very unpredictable. So I absolutely understand. I actually just had someone from Brussels send me a text message saying, I don't know what's going on, but I don't think it's going to happen to catch the live. Couple of things as housekeeping. Number one, if you are catching this on the recording, we got you. We're gonna record this and we're gonna make sure that it goes out. We had hundreds of coaches across I can't believe I'm saying this, the world, register for this. And obviously with different time zones, we understand that, my coach in Malaysia this morning was like, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, as much as I'm excited for this, I'm not ruining my sleep. So we appreciate that. For those who are also on the call live, hello, welcome. But don't worry, you will also get the replay. Sylvie has tons of gold nuggets that are going to be delivered here. And if you're the kind of person like me who wants to also re-listen and possibly catch something that you didn't quite grasp, you are going to get a recording. So welcome. Now, to those who are unfamiliar with Designs for Sport, unfamiliar with myself, with the masterclass series, I'll do a little bit of a Cole's Notes version on what this is all about, so that you understand what's going on. So this is, oh, cool. I'm seeing some names here. Look at all these people that are joining. This is amazing. So my name is Melissa Arachi. I'm a sports nutrition specialist. I live in Toronto. I support coaches in Canada, the US, and international. I actually also have 3 clones. That's incorrect, but if you're not already following Designs for Sport or myself or Sylvie on socials, I'm going to be posting those in the group. I'm sort of your mediator for today. Sylvie is the star. I will be introducing her and doing a little bio before she starts talking so that you get to know who she is. And the master classes, they are 1 hour of an opportunity that Designs for Sport is really working on creating monthly to have available to our coaches to bring together the strength and conditioning community. Whether that is the strength coach, the sports nutritionist, the athletic therapist, the personal trainer, whatever your title or role happens to be, our hope is that we can start to bring together coaches all over the world, providing leaders in their craft, like Sylvie, to speak on topics that we think are very important. Obviously, nutrition is definitely one of those. We've had some great speakers in the past. We'll have some great speakers going forward, and you guys are in for quite a treat today. So still another 2 minutes on the clock, at least on my time. We will start at 1 o'clock and we will get started. But to all those trickling in, keep your videos on. If you want to post on social media, you can tag us at Designs for Sport. We would love to share and connect. Also, if you have colleagues or other coaches that you know of who, if you're listening to Sylvie thinking, man, I know someone who could totally benefit from this, share and collab. Our hope is to be able to reach as many coaches as possible and help people, not just within the Designs for Sport community, but extend that out. So I've been talking for a really, really long time. I would just love in the chat for the next minute, if you would be so kind to share, where are you tuning in from? So if you just want to throw in that chat box, give us a shout out, see what's going on. Heather, see what's going on from each part of the world. I would love to better understand who we have on our call. We have someone from Toronto. Hi, Lisa. Ken is from Toronto. Curtis, Ontario. We got Durham representing. Toronto, Quebec. Guelph, Waterloo. Okay, a little bit of the West. Hey, Corey. Nashville, Tennessee. Okay, so the Canadians are dominating. Hey, Naomi. Edmonton, Ottawa. Okay, Chicago. Hey, James. I was in Chicago on a layover. Paris, Ontario. Thank you for specifying there. Virgin Islands, so cool. Pickering, hey Dante, I was just in Pickering. I was caught in traffic on my way home from Pickering. Miami, Atlanta, Bryce, what's up? Good to virtually see you. I was visiting Atlanta. I was visiting Chicago just recently. Germany, oh my goodness. Lena, welcome. Ontario, Niagara Falls. Hi, Frank. This is wonderful, everyone. Keep those spilling in. That is so cool. Canada is representing in a big way right now. It is 1 o'clock, so I will get started introducing Sylvie so that we can start on time and more importantly, have time for Sylvie to answer your questions. I know that that is where a lot of these connections are made, and I want us to have enough time in order to do that. So I'm just quickly going to transition gears. So to those who just joined, welcome. Feel free to put in the chat box where you're from. Feel free to share your experience on the masterclass. You can share us on social. We're at Designs for Sport. And I'm going to also put in Sylvie's handle as well. So you can be sure to tag her. It's her first and last name, Sylvie Tetrault. My last name is horrendous. You can butcher it. I'm hoping Tetrault. How are we doing? Tetrault is.
It's Tetrault, but
Tetrault.
That's fine. Yeah.
I could do that. So let's do a quick intro on Sylvie, and then without further ado, I will hand it off to you. So Sylvie Tetrault is a sports nutritionist, a strength and conditioning coach, functional diagnostic practitioner with a Bachelor of Science in Kin. Quite the extensive history. She works alongside 20-year hockey veteran and Stanley Cup winner Gary Roberts. She's been doing this since 2011. And she is the go-to nutrition pro at the renowned Gary Roberts Performance Center in Ontario, Canada. So to those from Canada, we have a homegrown here. Actually, Sylvie, I will speak to this more accurately, is from the East Coast. Right, Sylvie? Yes.
And
Sylvie works with professional athletes ranging from NHL, UFC, Olympians, Ironman, and high performers with a mission to help all of her clients find their inner athlete through hands-on nutrition and lifestyle coaching. Sylvie today is going to speak on the topic of nutrition periodization, but I am going to let her deep dive into that. For all of those on the call right now that have questions or comments to Sylvie as she's presenting, what I am going to ask is that you input those questions to the chat. Like I said, I will be mediating, so I will be sure to address all of those questions and more. If you have questions that come up, of course, you can unmute after the presentation. If something comes up and you want to just put a pin in it and pop it in the chat, please feel free to do that. And without further ado, everyone, Sylvie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Melissa, for the great introduction. I hardly have to introduce myself, so that's always perfect. But I'm just going to share my screen here and we will get started. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. Slideshow. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so we are talking about nutrition periodization, that fun word that I probably wasn't able to pronounce until about 5 years ago, but I use it all the time, and we're going to break it down and talk about a lot of practical stuff today, but I will do just a brief intro because Melissa already did an amazing intro on me. But yeah, I am from the East Coast of Canada. I grew up in Nova Scotia, farmers markets, very small town right on the ocean. My background is in science as well. So I kind of describe myself as a science loving hippie. So I come from my parents were both basically described as hippies. So very, traditional practices. I went to the farmers market every Saturday. We had a garden in our backyard. So I was very fortunate to be introduced to, kind of the holistic mindset of things at a very young age. But I also really loved science and I really loved sport. So this was kind of me melding the two together with my background. So as Melissa mentioned, my jam is, high performance athletics, but it's also, high performance in general. So people who want to get the most out of their performance in life and optimizing not only their performance, but also their health long-term. So yeah, I have 13 years of experience in the fitness industry. I started off in just general fitness and then specialized more in the sports world. But yeah, I'm going to talk about a lot of the, making mistakes in my coaching history, what I've done in the past, experience, and then also just changing my mind over the years, and kind of, always having this progressive outlook with nutrition and training, and making sure that I'm adjusting to the times, because it is definitely not easy in this field. There's so much information, as I'm sure all of you know. So I'm going to try to cover everything, and I'm going to get right into it. Please let me know your questions throughout so that I can answer them at the end, and we'll get right into it. So specific goals require specific training methods, recovery, and nutrition methods. So a lot of the time, the biggest mistake that I see when people come to me about their nutrition is they're just kind of eating, maybe they're eating in a quote unquote healthy way, but they're not aligning with their eating patterns with their goals from both a training perspective and also a health perspective. So my goal with clients is always to look at how do we match that, those goals that you have from a training perspective to what you're doing with your nutrition. So this is what we're going to focus on today, is just really talking about that, giving examples, and making sure that it's clear what we can do in terms of aligning these training and health goals to the nutrition. Okay, so what will be covered? Also, if there's any spelling mistakes in my slides, I apologize. I am not the best at this part in design. I really focus on just delivering the information. So I apologize in advance if you see anything. So what we will be covering is nutrition periodization. So we're going to start out with the term periodization. We're going to do some definitions. We're going to talk about why it's important. Then we're going to get into nutrition periodization, practical applications for athletes and non-athletes. So if you work with non-athletes on this call, or you're a non-athlete and want to implement this for yourself, we are absolutely going to cover what you can do to implement this. You do not have to be a professional athlete to apply this. And then we're also going to go through a case study. So I love to just give practical examples, because it's great in theory and the research is awesome. But then when we're not actually looking at an actual person, it's hard to actually put this into motion and really get the results that we're looking for with these individuals. So we're going to start with what is training periodization. So the first part of this is going to be some definitions, science background. So bear with me in this process, but it's very important for us to just look at what is training periodization. So the term periodization, in the context of exercising training, refers to long-term progressive approach designed to improve athletic performance by systematically varying training throughout the year. So when we look at this, it's basically looking at that, if we use an athlete as an example, we're looking at that whole year and getting the most out of those different phases. And we're going to use a lot of examples of athletes, but we're also going to apply that again to the everyday person who wants to apply nutrition periodization. So when we look at training periodization, it's different phases. So for example, in the athlete setting, different phases of what they would be doing in season versus what they would be doing off season in their training. And so when we look at these definitions, we really want to make sure that, okay, we know what training periodization is, and how do we meet it, or how do we align it with nutrition periodization? So the godfather of American fitness industry, Jack LaLanne, I don't know exactly how to say that, has remarked, exercise is the king while nutrition is queen. Put them together and we have a kingdom. So I love this. I would actually add another layer, and this is such a hot topic that I, could nerd out on for an entire presentation, but I'll spare that for another one. But I would meet that with recovery and stress resilience and other lifestyle factors. So when we look at nutrition and training, we also want to look at the context of who is this person, what other stressors do they have in their life? And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is like, okay, how does the training and nutrition work, but also what are they doing for recovery? So if we look at melding the two, this is what we're going to talk about today. So background of nutrition periodization. So basically it's a relatively new concept. So although people might be implementing it, and coaches for years have probably been going through different phases and aligning, especially in the athlete setting, aligning their in-season nutrition with their off-season nutrition goals and training goals, but basically it hasn't been defined or studied a lot. So we're still kind of working through a lot of the research. So the 2007 International Association of Athletics Federation Nutrition Consensus presented the first formal opportunity to provide theoretical guidelines for nutrition periodization with suggestions of appropriate energetic and macronutrient demands of different training phases within a yearly periodized training plan. So again, this is relatively new, 2007. So just kind of looking at how do we align and talk about studying these specific phases as it pertains to nutrition and training periodization. Okay, so what is periodized nutrition? I like to give a couple examples because sometimes, or definitions I should say, because sometimes one resonates more with others, and we're just going to break it down into looking again at these definitions. So periodized nutrition refers to the planned, purposeful, and strategic use of specific nutrition interventions to enhance the adaptation targeted by individual exercise sessions or periodic training plans, or to obtain other effects that will enhance performance longer term. Another definition, and to expand on that even further, is the definition of periodized nutrition or nutritional training, you can call it, introduced above includes all of the methods that use nutrition in the presence or absence of training to improve long-term performance. These methods include manipulation of nutrient availability before, during, and after training, but could also include practices that prepare other organs for competition through nutritional manipulation. So improving stomach comfort during competition. And this is a major area of research, especially in the endurance field of sports nutrition. There's been a lot of GI studies that have come out about how do we manipulate and optimize GI function for performance and competition, because they don't always go hand in hand with the amount of stress load and then other interventions that, again, could cause a lot of stress on the GI system. So this is just looking at kind of more of that functional approach. So not only are we talking about just performance, but what are some of these other health measures that we can also use nutrition periodization with? Okay, so when we look at, again, just like breaking it down to what is periodization, it's looked at in three cycles or three phases, and we can kind of go from macro, so we're looking at months to year, all the way down to micro, where we're looking at days and within days. So again, like pre-post down to the hour, what the client or athlete is doing. Meso would be the weeks or months in between. So we could use it in a lot of different contexts, but just kind of going from that, let's look at the whole picture and long-term goals, and then let's break it down to what daily interventions we can do. So we can also look at it another way, and I've talked about this, in a different context of the athletes, because, when we look at your client's years, it could look different than an athlete, right? They don't necessarily have a, phased in season, a phased off season, a preseason, and then a postseason. But they could, have specific goals. And the classic one is, I want to build muscle mass and I want to burn fat. And a lot of people want to do those at the exact same time. Unfortunately, our body doesn't necessarily want to be doing those two things at the exact same time. So we could look at it as burning phase, a building phase, and a balance phase. And you're not necessarily going to be doing all three in order. You could be going back and forth. But the burn phase could be, it could be optimizing body composition, so burning body fat. It could also be stressful periods in someone's life. So they might be more stressed, which means that they might be in more of a catabolic breaking down state where we need to support them in that perspective to deal with that. Sometimes in season, athletes are in sort of more of a burn phase, like they have to keep up with the amount of performance and stressors on their system. So they might be in that stage where you're just dealing with kind of like making sure that they're not breaking down too much. And then we have building. So the classic building example would be hypertrophy, off season, but also health boosting phase. So we're going to talk a lot about, again, melding kind of the functional aspect of these health markers for our clients and how we could use that in nutrition periodization. But it could be, optimizing gut health, optimizing immune health. A lot of that stuff does happen when a person can really focus on their health and or their specific goals with maybe an off season phase. And then balance. So the term balance, our body is always trying to be in quote unquote homeostasis, but we also have goals and we want to do things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking a break or, you're just focusing on maintenance per se, but we want things to be sustainable. We want people to understand their bodies long-term and that their bodies can go through these different phases. So for example, in the athlete setting, that might look like deload weeks, resets, transitionary periods where, again, we're not building or burning or have those specific goals, but we might be focusing on, again, like just transitioning in between phases. So this is a very busy slide. I promise we'll break it down a bit more, but this is an example of what, kind of how we would break it down from a nutrition periodization standpoint. So we'd be looking at, okay, what are the events, the season length, the year. We're basically looking at what's going on in this person's schedule. If they're an Olympian, kind of, again, they have a long period of time between their major competitions. They're going to have a lot of mini competitions in between that. But again, what are the events? What are the sport specific things? And then if it's a client who just has specific goals, we want to break that down and looking at the big picture. So what are the individual athlete gaps to these events, sport-specific success determinants? So again, where are they having downtime, quote unquote? When are they in stressful states? We want to look at these as a whole, just to make sure we're getting the whole picture of what's going on. What are the exercise, training, and recovery periodization decisions that are long-term? So we're looking again at that macro view, medium, so within weeks, and then also the short-term within days. So we want to address the individual athlete gaps, making sure we're always taking into account, I'm going to say this term a lot, and something that I always address with any client is context matters, and it depends on the individual. So we're going to talk a lot about how do we individualize these approaches and not just use this general science, but really try to instill it in these individuals that we're working with. So what are the associated macro, meso, and micro purposely periodized nutrition interventions? Okay, so we're looking at, again, periodized training and recovery, and how can we break that down? So this is looking at an example of carbohydrates, protein, and iron as a micronutrient to look at, how would we look at that from a macro perspective, a meso perspective in the weeks, and then micro. So when we look at carbohydrates, they're probably the most studied in terms of, carbohydrate manipulation with athletes specifically, but it's going to look different, for example, in what they're doing in, the longer mesocycle of an in-season versus the off season, where maybe they do have some body composition goals that they're trying to work through. And then the same thing goes for fats and protein. So looking at protein adjustment, if they're in a hypertrophy phase in the off season, we're going to adjust their protein according to that specific goal. And then we're going to look at the micro level and really making sure that what are they doing from a day-to-day perspective? Are they getting, again, not to use micro term, but micronutrients that they need. So we're looking at those day-to-day adjustments and optimizing pre, during, and post workout nutrition based on how the athlete is progressing through each phase. Okay, so macro cycle, we're going to break these down just a little bit further. So we're looking again months to year. So this is what I would look at in terms of okay, what does this client have going on throughout the whole year? So a roadmap. So for example, if there's some coaches out there who are looking at, okay, if I only have this client only signed up with me for, a year, or sorry, probably not a year, maybe a couple months, I would still map out, okay, what do you want to do within the next year? What are your goals? It is, for those of you interested out there, it is an opportunity for client retention as well. So making sure that you're okay, this is what the whole year is going to look like. So again, looking at that macro scale of what their goals are, and looking at the next season. So if we use the athlete example again, we look at in-season, post-season, off-season, preseason, and off-season and preseason camp. So those are going to look different in terms of what they need from a nutrition perspective. And then we look at macro health considerations. So do they have injuries, GI health? We're going to use an example of GI health later. But what are some of the macro big considerations when it comes to their health and what they want to work on? What are the long-term goals? So we want to sort of look at what does, performance meets longevity look like for this individual. And that's a hard one when it comes to athletes because, their main goal in season is to perform. So sometimes they have to sacrifice some of those, longevity and health measures in order to perform in their sport. And sometimes that might be the case with some of your clients. They really have something specific coming up that they want, body composition goals or, specifics with their health that, again, they might compromise some other things in order to reach those goals. So again, looking at long-term compliance is very important too. How dedicated is this client overall to reaching their goals? And then we want to look at assessment of individual energy demands, so training intensity, duration, frequency, and again, what time of year. And then we want to look at targeted phase ergonomic aids, so supplementation. What can we do to help this client to make sure they're not just taking all of the supplements just because they read it on the internet that it was really good, but that's targeted towards what phase that they're in. So again, my answer to everything is always, it depends, because we have to look at the context, we have to look at the big picture, and we want to make sure that we're going through different phases so we're not just throwing everything at the client or athlete at a time. Okay, so when we look at, mesocycle. So when we look at mesocycles, it's kind of like the weeks to days. So this would be a particular phase within that. And I'm going to give you examples of this. But again, it would be an in-season phase, a post-season phase, an off-season phase, a pre-training. So pre-season, which would be camp in a lot of cases. So again, prepping their bodies to make pass certain tests, to perform well in certain fitness testing. So that would look different from a nutrition perspective than what they were doing, say, in the in-season, which is really focused on performance-driven goals. So what are the goals of the phase? Again, performance would be more in-season. Off-season might be body composition goals, and then other specific health goals that they want to optimize during their quote-unquote downtime and when they have time to actually address some new training and nutrition interventions. So we want to match the goal to total stress load. I'm going to talk about total stress load as it pertains to athletes, but also, as it pertains to your individual clients, because athletes are, they do have, their job is to train all the time, eat all the time, and focus on recovery. That's not the case with, say, an executive client who has a full-time job, who has a family, who has other things going on in their life aside from just their training and their performance, right? So these are all things that we want to consider. What is the total stress load? And being realistic with clients in terms of setting these goals. During heavy competition, strategic planning for training, nutrition, and recovery for optimizing performance. And then we also want to focus on phase-specific health considerations. So is the client going through an injury? Do they have something, specific with their health that they need to focus? Are they pre-diabetic? Do they have high cholesterol? What is going on with that person that might need to be addressed before some of their other goals that we want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases with optimizing the client's health in general and supporting that. And then we want to look at, as again, assessment of individual energy demands, targeted phase, ergonomic aids, ergogenic, not ergonomic, ergogenic. Wow, I say that word so much, you would think I would know it by now. But supplementation, we're looking at kind of, again, that long-term, breaking it into phases and making sure that it's targeted towards that phase. And then we look at micro, so days within days. And so adaptations, depending on progress towards goals. So like there might be shifts in body composition. We're going to look at pre, during, and post-training nutrition and recovery interventions. So again, this is looking at day-to-day, hour-to-hour, what's going on in their schedule, matching the goal with the total stress load. So this is where we can look at day-to-day assessments, getting, even if your client isn't an athlete, checking in with things like HRV and athlete check-ins to see how they're doing on a daily basis. What is going on in the athlete's life? Are they, signing a new contract? Are they, do they have a lot of workload stress right now? What is going on with that individual on a day-to-day basis that would contribute to their overall stress load? And then again, day-to-day health specifics, health considerations, have they had like a 24-hour GI issue that we would need to address? And then just looking at, again, overall, like, are there these health measures that we're looking at that we can really focus on day-to-day, micro level? What can we do to boost this person's health? Assessment of individual energy demands. So again, looking at, are they training really hard on a regular basis? Are they adding in more, secret cardio or whatever it is? So this is kind of talking to your client and talking to, even yourself, if this is for yourself, talking to yourself about, okay, am I matching what I'm doing with my training, with my nutrition, and then also my recovery? And so adaptation is key with this. So we want to adapt, we want to assess, we want to constantly be adjusting to what the client is going through and what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. So examples of nutrition periodization interventions. This would be a lot to go over every single one of these, but we're going to talk about some of the ones that have been well studied. So we want to overall look at estimation of total energy expenditure and total energy intake. So the best way to do this, and this is not going to be accessible to everybody, but the best way to do this would be to go and get your calorimetry checked with, in a lab where basically you're looking at how many calories you're resting, your RMR, your resting metabolic rate. Again, not accessible to everybody. I love using the Cunningham equation if I have an athlete's or client's body fat percentage. So I'll use that as an estimation, but we know the calorie model is not going to be the be all end all. It's just a measure of total energy. So we're just looking at the quantity, but also we have to really consider the quantity. And we're going to talk about that in a case study. But again, how much is this athlete eating? Something that's very common, which I mentioned in the bottom, is relative energy deficiency in sports. So it's called RED. So essentially, the athlete starts to decline in their performance based on not having enough energy, so not having enough food. Under eating, especially in the sports setting, is very common. Unfortunately, it's been taught that we kind of over-exercise and under-eat to get all of our goals. But we know that if that happens long-term, other health measures are going to be compromised, things like hormonal health and cycles if you're a woman. There's a lot of different measures that we want to look at from this perspective. And then also, are there considerations of, chronic dieting, just low availability of energy in general? And so again, we want to look at, do we need to go through different phases, and what approach are we going to use with this individual when we're looking at what intervention we're going to use? Substrate manipulation interventions, this is probably one of the most common one, especially with the popularity of, ketogenic diets at this time, high carbohydrate diets for athletes, and different manipulations with substrates. So again, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are major substrates. So the classic one that has been studied is train low, compete high. So this is kind of, again, making sure that we're looking at the overall amount of carbohydrates that a person would have for their training. So they'd be training in more of a decreased amount of carbohydrate, basically to spare glycogen stores for increased competition. This has been shown effective in trained individuals, but again, we really want to make sure that it's context specific, and that's specific more to the endurance training. And then, looking at performance and what exactly the goal is of that person. Some other examples are training fasted, recovery, so sleep low. So again, sleeping with very low energy availability and being able to, train first thing in the morning, training high and competing high. So that's kind of the classic high carbohydrate diet. And again, there's no one intervention that's going to work for everybody, and it's all context matters, but these are some examples of the specific interventions from a training periodization perspective that have been studied. And then we also want to look at, injury and health optimization phases. So again, like really focusing on, there's some specific stages of healing, especially if your client's been through surgery, or, I work with a lot of athletes, so injuries are just, unfortunately, they come up all the time. And so going through different phases of healing too, we'll actually do nutrition periodization healing for their injuries. So different nutrients that are required at that time, their energy expenditure goes down. So what does that mean with their total amount? They don't want to obviously boost body composition, so boost body fat at that time, but we do need to make sure they're healing. So again, we're playing around with the amount of energy that they have available, and then also making sure that they're getting what they need for their recovery. So the goal of training, so again, if we look at just overall, what is this client, like what is the goal of what they're currently doing? So it is known that many substrates, in particular muscle glycogen and plasma free fatty acids, act not only as fuels for exercise, for the exercise bout, but being undertaken also as regulators of cellular and whole body adaptation to exercise, and specifically endurance exercise. So again, a lot of the research here is in endurance when we're looking at some of these nutrition periodization principles, but we can take the research and really focus on, again, applying it in specific scenarios, basically in all exercise settings. So what is the goal? And so again, to continue on that, there's, the goal of training is not just, aesthetics. Obviously, there's a lot of benefits, which I won't go, everyone understands the benefits of exercise and training on this call, so I won't go through the whole list of that. But we want to look at enhancing various metabolic pathways and energy production in general. So again, increasing the size and storage of availability of fuels. So again, the capacity. So this is an example of a trained individual, for example, would have a lot better fat oxidation. So again, using fat as a fuel than say an untrained individual. So again, sparing glycogen for those high intensity moments. That would be an example of, you know, a benefit of training and kind of looking at these different nutrition interventions that we can focus on during that to get the most out of it. And then delivery of nutrients and oxygen to working muscles, that's a pretty obvious one. And then reducing accumulation of some byproducts. So again, making sure that we're looking at what is the goal. It's not only from a, you know, aesthetics perspective, but there might be some other underlying goals of training and what this individual wants to achieve. And it's important that, you know, again, education is at the forefront of what you're doing to make sure that it's understood. Okay, you know, this is what's going on in your body, and this is why we might want to focus on some of these things first to optimize your performance and longevity long term. Oh, he agrees. Perfect. Okay, so again, not an athlete. How do we implement nutrition periodization? So again, on the macro standpoint, we really want to look at, I don't know, the dog is very excited right now about this. Awesome. Okay, so when we look at like applying this not in an athlete setting, we want to look macro. So again, specific phased goal setting. So if you have the client, and I use this as an example, so you have the client for 3 months, let's look at 6 to 12 months, mapping that out and looking at, okay, you know, what does this client do for a living? What major stressors do they have in their life? What support system do they have? Just again, looking at the overall individual. Mesocycle. So we're looking at the goal of each phase. So again, foundational, is it going to be more body composition focused? Sustainability and maintenance. Are we going to really focus on some health measures and map out what that looks like from a nutrition perspective? What is the total stress load? Again, then choose interventions. So optimizing health and foundational principles. Maybe we're looking at calorie deficits in certain situations, again, in a timely manner, making sure that we're not doing it too long so that we're damaging things like metabolism and other measures long term. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of background noise.
The trash can.
Do you guys just want to make sure you're on mute? I can hear it. Can everyone else hear that?
It's Antonio. He needs to mute, and there's one other.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
I'm be able to mute them. Okay, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Hopefully you guys have figured out how to mute. Okay, so looking at the mesocycle, goal of each phase, what is the total stress load? Choosing the intervention. So again, like making sure that it's specific to the client and what phase that they're in. And then we're going to look at the micro. So day-to-day adjustments, daily stress loads, pre, during, post exercise adjustments. And then with the micro, I can't stress enough, this is where your coaching or your daily check-ins really makes a huge difference. There we go. I think I muted him. There, perfect. Okay. Moving on. So major considerations. So I've talked about total stress load several times, but what does this actually mean? You know, when we think about stress, we might think about emotional and mental, so perceived stress. So this might be, you know, workload, family, health, financial, whatever stress is going on in that person's life. That's what we might think about stress. So when we talk about stress, it's not just the mental and emotional part of it. It's also, you know, are they exercising too much maybe? So frequency, duration, intensity, do they have a physical job? Are they walking? So non-exercise activity thermogenesis is essentially how much you're burning throughout the day, plus a lot of activity. So their, energy expenditure might be very high. So we have to take all of that into consideration in looking at this total stress load. We also have a lot of internal stress. So things like inflammation, pathogens, toxins, those types of things that we do need to take into consideration when we're looking at what is going on with this client and their total stress load, and can they handle, the phase that they're going into, for example, a hypertrophy phase, if they have a lot of this other stress going on in their life. So again, just that little coaching aspect that we can look at the overall big picture of what's going on. So when we look at, kind of breaking this down, when we look at supplementation and periodization, because this is a supplement company, I'm not going to fully talk about specifics with each supplement, but this is a process of how you would look at supplement periodization. So going through different phases of supplementation. So what is the proposed nutrition or supplement intervention? You obviously want to test or pilot that in training. So this is with any new nutrition intervention or supplement that you want to try with an athlete or someone who might be going through, is you want to test that not when they're, in a competition phase, but when they're going through their training, so that if it's going to be effective. We also want to look at specific measures of, is this working or is this not working? A lot of the time it's just asking the client, looking at things like heart rate and recovery, and then looking at performance measures. And if you're measuring things like body fat, that type of thing, those are measures that you can actually see, are these interventions working? We also want to look at the cost of this. So, cost from a money perspective and financial perspective, but also from a, risk versus reward. So making sure that we're looking at what is the risk of taking this? Are there any side effects? Are there things that we need to consider in each phase when we're looking at the big picture here of should we implement a specific nutrition intervention or a supplement? And then we want to analyze, refine, adjust, and most importantly, individualize. So making sure that we're looking at, is this working for this individual? How do we adjust it? And how do we phase it in these different scenarios for this client? So case study, my favorite part. I've just talked a lot, so I'm going to take a little sip of water. I'm going to let you guys think about some questions up to this point. Okay, so we look at a case study. This is actually a real life client who I had. So I wanted to break it down because he's kind of the perfect example of like a lot going on, very health conscious, but just kind of not sure how to implement all this, wanted to do everything at the same time. So he is a 38-year-old male, owns a restaurant. So he had, weird hours, currently in a slower time, but ramping back up to, busy season in 2 to 3 months. And he's mainly sedentary right now. So he's not walking around a lot. He, again, just really wants to focus on, he has a little bit of downtime right now, and he's always wanted to build muscle mass. So we're looking at least 5 pounds minimum. And then ideally he wants to get up to 190. His current training schedule was weights 3 times a week and cardio 3 times a week. We did a little, energy expenditure. It was around 3,200 that he would be, again, in a, just burning throughout the day, what his activity calendar or activity calculator was like. And you guys can check that out on your own. I do have it in my references. Current supplements as well. He was just taking whey protein. He was taking a multi, which was kind of just from the drugstore. And then he was taking omegas. And then he was also taking a pre-workout because he felt like for his workouts, he just didn't have a lot of energy. So some of his major health considerations were improving gut health. So he always felt like he had quote unquote a fast metabolism, things, he was not able to gain weight, had some gut discomfort. But again, when he's tried to gain weight in the past, he just would try to eat as much food as possible. Things did not go over well for his gut. So we tried to talk about, again, phasing his protocols to make sure that we're really addressing some of these health measures. He also was inconsistent with his sleep, owning a restaurant and having weird hours before and now, being sort of on call. His sleep quality was not the best. Fatigue as well. So he felt like he had an afternoon dip. So these are some health measures that before we even go to the hypertrophy goal that we would need to consider and look at phasing this into his plan. So We did an assessment originally. So we did a health questionnaire. We looked at food training and recovery diaries. So I get, my clients to kind of, not necessarily down to the macronutrient or the calorie, but I do think it's information and it's data. If you can get that information and kind of, I'm like, okay, how much of the macronutrients are you getting? What does your training look like? What does your recovery look like? So how are you feeling on a daily basis? So these daily check-ins. So I got him to do that for about a week. We did an initial consultation where we looked at body composition analysis. We did skin folds, just as, again, what measurement are you using to assess progress with your clients? Doesn't necessarily have to be body composition. In his case, he really wanted to measure this to see if he was gaining lean muscle mass. So we set goals. We decided on some tracking variables, again, from body composition perspective. And then, to look at it from a functional approach. And because, again, I have that hippie background, I kind of look at, okay, what's going on with the health of this client? This is functional diagnostic nutrition and looking at the full systems approach, as opposed to just, okay, this is your goal, we're going to go straight into hypertrophy. We're going to address other health measures first, so kind of focus on a foundational phase first. So we looked at assimilation. So digestion, that's looking at like his microbiome, what's going on with that. He does have some digestive stuff, so I knew that that would be something that we'd have to address. Defense and repair, so this is immune system, inflammation, certain infections, energy. So again, energy regulation, mitochondrial health, biotransformation and elimination. So again, how is this client detoxifying? Do they have a lot of toxic load? What about mold? So there's a lot of different factors that we looked at to kind of get this whole approach to helping this client reach their goals. Transport. So again, this is cardiovascular, lymphatic, communication. So this is his endocrine system, looking at neurotransmitters, immune messengers, making sure that we're looking at structural integrity. So this is musculoskeletal system, and just, again, checking in with all of these health measures. We did a little check in to see which ones were the top 3 priority, and definitely sleep, energy, and gastrointestinal were up there and kind of kept coming up, and things that he felt were holding him back from getting to his goals. And then we looked at a client timeline. So I do this all the time with my clients, as I look at, okay, what does the total timeline look like? Like, when have they had major stressors in their life? What does their next year look like? And we really focused on mapping out what that looked like. So the macro phase. So this is where we looked at, he signed up for 6 months. So we mapped out actually the entire year, just so that we can say, okay, this, might take longer than 6 months. I never want to fully guarantee this is what exactly is going to happen during that time, because as probably all the coaches know on this call, there's no guarantees. It's about compliance. It's about making sure that you're checking in with your client, making sure that you're doing your job as a coach and educator, but also you can't do it for your client. So making sure that you're checking in with those things. So realistic expectations is a big one. Putting it out there from the beginning. I always say, commitment and accountability are the 2 things that I'm always looking for, in clients. So making sure that, again, you're on the same page. Stressful time coming up. So, this is something to just, in 2 to 3 months, he said, I go into a really busy time. It gets very stressful. At that time, I just kind of want to maintain the weight that I put on. If we have 3 months to put on weight, obviously we might not get exactly where he wants, but we can focus on really building him up from a health perspective, but also from the hypertrophy perspective. So we're going to focus on 3 phases, mapping out over 6 month period of time. And this is sort of the roadmap that we talked about. So foundational health focus, we focused a lot on improving gut health, sleep, and energy, goal-based nutrition. So again, hypertrophy, focusing on keeping weight on during this stressful time, stress resilience, and then keeping body fat from increasing during that time. So he felt like he just, he would work really hard to try to put on muscle mass. And then in stressful times, it's like he just lost it all. So we wanted to really help him maintain. So meso phase number 1. So the focus was for foundational principles. We wanted to, quote unquote, prime the body for upcoming phases. We wanted to boost his gut health, support nutrition interventions, sleep and recovery interventions. For him, we focused on assessment of current habits. So what is he currently doing? We focused on not only quantity, but also quality, making sure that we really went over, okay, what sources of protein is he having? What's the quality of brands that he's choosing, those types of things. So we really focused on some health measures. We focused on just general gut support in the beginning. We did do some testing to kind of get a little bit more information, but in the beginning, we just focused on general practices, increasing the diversity of his diet, looking at pre and probiotic foods. We also looked at focused on balancing blood sugar throughout the day. So that was a big one for his fatigue. And then lifestyle interventions. So we looked at sleep quality, habits, circadian rhythm optimization. So there was a lot that he could do just from a habit building perspective in this first phase. So this first phase for us lasted about 4 to 6 weeks. And then we started to go into a little bit more of the hypertrophy stuff because he already had a lot of great habits. It was just focusing on the foundational stuff. For supplementation, he was already taking some protein powder, some pre-workout. We just focused on some specifics based on where he was at from boosting his health. So we got him, the quality factor of supplements. We looked at one, boosting his energy. So I looked at a multivitamin option, mitochondrial energy, which I love for energy production. If it has a lot of B vitamins, we focused on just, again, generally supporting his sleep and his energy and his gut health. This is something that I love to nerd out on in a whole other topic, but I wanted to put it in here because without proper gut function, it would be nearly impossible for him to he still could get his goals of hypertrophy, but again, it would be maybe very dysfunctional. He might have, just been pounding whey protein shakes all day, which again, we've all seen, but we wanted to make sure we were really supporting his long-term focus of optimizing his gut health. So an optimal balanced microbiome, it may support muscle protein synthesis, and mitochondrial biogenesis. So these are two areas that, again, there needs a lot of attention in terms of research, but I think this is really fascinating and exciting that there really is, we know that there's a gut-brain connection and that's being studied a lot, but there's also a gut-muscle axis. So again, opportunity for muscle protein synthesis, building of muscle mass is 100% connected to how our gut is functioning. So very interesting stuff. Mesophase 2. So again, what is the focus? Goal-based nutrition. This is where we went into hypertrophy focus. So our nutrition interventions. I swear I'm wrapping up soon, Melissa. I'm trying to. So we focused on hypertrophy. So this is really when we got into playing around with different substrates. We talked about quantity. We talked about a surplus of calories. So we gradually increased this for him because we wanted to support his GI function, not just making sure that he's eating 700 calories more a day. That's really hard for some individuals, especially because he felt like he had GI functions. We wanted to make sure he had that foundational base before we went into just adding and dumping a bunch of calories in his system. We talked about nutrient timing. So we did an evening protein snack, for example. We focused on leucine-rich foods. So leucine is the most studied amino acid for helping with muscle protein synthesis. We continued to support quality food choices and gut health in the process. So again, like once he was ready to kind of go into that phase, his symptoms were getting better with GI. We knew that he could probably support this hypertrophy phase. Then we looked at lifestyle interventions. So I got him to adjust his training a bit to 4 times a week weights and then less conditioning to just keep his endurance. He was really worried about losing his endurance. We continued to monitor sleep, energy, and GI function. We did some additional supplements. We added in some vitamin D because we did some blood work and we noticed that that was an issue for him. So again, it's targeted, it's specific to the individual. And then we looked at, he wasn't comfortable doing creatine. I love creatine in certain situations, but that is an intervention. It's the most studied sports supplement out there. And I won't get into all of the benefits of it, but again, that could be an intervention for a hypertrophy client. Mesophase 3, so this is really where we focused on quantity and quality, kind of mixing the two, making sure that we were really addressing the stress piece. So this is when I talked about total stress lows. So we wanted to make sure that we kept the weight on during the stressful time. We adjusted his training because he had shorter amount of time. He had more stress on his system. He did more walking and golf. We focused on training high. So on his training days, we did higher carbohydrates. On his train low days, we essentially meant that we did lower carbohydrate. We weren't 100% ketogenic, but we did do some interventions with carbohydrate just to make sure that he was continually reaching his goals and feeling like he wasn't going in the opposite direction. Supplementation, we switched to a different multivitamin just for, maintaining what he was currently doing. We did, because his energy levels have really improved. So again, just making sure that he's getting a lot of nutrients in a stressful time. We talked about some specific adrenal health just based off of his stressful situations. We talked continuing with magnesium, omega-3s, and some adaptogens as well. So these were just some interventions, again, specific to the client and what he was going through at that time. So when we look at the micro part, this is the day-to-day within that, day-to-day stress, we were looking at his training adaptations. We were constantly monitoring his pre-post workout. So protein timing, pre-bed and around workouts. We were looking at sleep quality, recovery strategies, looking at individual micronutrients. So we did do some functional testing and looked at some blood work to kind of get, again, individualized with the micro details of this. And then we looked at maintenance and stress resilience. So again, what is he doing pre, post, during to maintain lean muscle mass, but also make sure that we're looking at, how is he dealing with his overall stress load. So protein timing, this is one of the micro details that might be interesting for you to kind of implement, but I kind of look at a 5-hour window for the most part. What are they, does everyone need to eat a pre-workout meal? It depends. If it's first thing in the morning and the client doesn't like to eat, as long as maybe they have a protein shake and a meal within that 5-hour period of their workout and pre and post, we can look at different interventions. So this is just a neat diagram to kind of, again, look at, protein timing, and that would be a specific micro detail that you might want to pay attention to. So main takeaways, context matters. What is going on with the client? N=1 concept. So I love this. Consider the individual, not just the data and what has worked for others. We are definitely in a time where it's like, this worked for my friend. And, I saw this and I saw that this works for everybody. And it is like, never is that the situation. We're all individuals. We all have individual backgrounds. We all have individual needs, goals. So it's important to look at the N=1 concept. Research helps. Obviously, I'm going to give you a ton of research in terms of like my references, that I love this stuff. I love the science, but again, we have to look at the individual and make sure, does this make sense in this situation? Periodized training, nutrition, and recovery strategies will help to optimize performance and health goals. These periodized plans are not just for athletes. They're looking to optimize training, health, and longevity. And then adaptability and adjustments are key with any long-term plan. So this requires follow-up down to daily activities, stressors, checking in with what's going on in your life and adjusting your training around that. And then these are all my references that I will share out. And this is my information. I spelled my name wrong in my email, but I forgot I told you there would be spelling mistakes.
Of all spelling errors.
Yeah, exactly. So this is my information. I obviously get very excited about this stuff. So please reach out to me if we don't chat today about any questions. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys listening.
We have 7 rapid fire minutes till this hour. I totally understand that obviously with coaches, certain timelines might be a little bit tight. So for those who can stay on, we will take some questions. I do have some questions that have popped up in the chat. So I will ask those first. And then if anybody else wants to pop in their question, they can do so. I think we'll stick to the chat versus unmuting just for time purposes. So we just have a question here from Mark Sylvie. Mark is asking, when cycling carbohydrates like that, so I guess we're referring to the case study, do you also cycle calories daily or increase fats on those days to keep caloric intake similar?
Yes, absolutely. So I try to, it's funny, a lot of people on their like off days or recovery days kind of like eat less, exercise less, which could be, an intervention for someone who is maybe a little less stressed. But I definitely, when I'm adjusting carbohydrates, I will bring the fats up on those days just to make sure that we're staying consistent with the overall. So that might be a day where the client was doing some lower intensity cardio and they could have more fat utilization than carbohydrate utilization. But absolutely. And I think it's a great intervention to kind of, again, make sure that you're adjusting the calorie needs to what's going on with that client. So I typically try to keep the calories consistent and make sure that we're just making little adjustments here and there to it.
Thanks for the question, Mark. And we have another one here in the chat from Catherine. So Catherine asks, how do you keep track of macro, meso, and micro data for clients? So for example, software platforms, questionnaires, etc. How do you prefer to deliver information to clients on a daily basis?
Yeah, great question. So there's so many different tracking methods. I have like, basically when I'm working with a client, I'll map out the macro phases. So again, like what their whole year looks like. Mesocycles, I'll say this is kind of based on your goals. I'll map out how long that I think it would, based on obviously data and then experience and working with clients and kind of seeing how long these things take. Lifestyle stuff comes up, so I'll kind of map it out in a time frame. And then obviously the micro stuff is really where the coaching really makes a huge difference. So checking in with things like, I'm a data nerd, so if they have things like the Oura Ring or the Whoop Band or HRV tracking, or I love just general questionnaires, like how they're feeling on a regular basis. So I'll get them to check in with their recovery, their nutrition, and their energy and sleep, and I'll get them to do just a little check of like, out of 10, how is this today? And it's a good measure just to get feedback. There's so many different tracking measurements, but again, that it's just mapping it out in making sure that we're looking at macro, meso, and then micro details of like the day-to-day stuff, and making sure that you're getting as much data and information from them on a regular basis. I use a platform called Practice Better. It just keeps all of my information in one spot. I'm not very organized when it comes to emails, so I'll try to just have everything and deliver it in that setting so that they can give me feedback and chat. And I'm an open book when it comes to that. I say reach out, send me labels, send me things, send me any data that you have, because it'll just benefit me as a coach as well to help you. Hopefully that answered your question.
We have 3 more, and I know we're here at 5 minutes, so let's see how we can get through these. And obviously, as Sylvie keeps mentioning, to any coach that wants to connect with Sylvie offline, clearly she is more than gracious to offer, some of her time if doing even some sort of a consult with her is something you feel you'd benefit from. So we obviously have her information up on the screen, but we have 3 questions. I'm going to hope we can get these 3 questions done, and we'll cap it here. So from Joshua is asking, cycling duration of carbohydrate loading for endurance athletes. This sounds like a really big question, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so I primarily, I do work with some endurance athletes. I primarily do work with power and team sport athletes, but it's typically I do like the train low, compete high method for training, depending on the person. But quality is a big one for this, because I find, as I was mentioning, GI discomfort is a big one. So sometimes when we increase carbohydrates too much and too soon, there's a lot of GI discomfort that goes along with that. So in terms of the duration, it would really depend on the individual, but I do like kind of like that week leading up to gradually increase, even if it's just, if they were doing, 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram per day, increasing to maybe 6, and then 7 the next day, and 8, and maybe even getting up to, if you wanted to do the really higher carbohydrate, getting up to the 12 range. So in the research, that's sort of, again, kind of like cycling up to that week and making sure that you're progressively doing it and monitoring GI dysfunction, and also making sure that you're testing it in the training. That is a big question, and I will talk about it further with you, Joshua, if you want. But yeah, that's sort of, again, like making sure that you're looking at leading up to the competition and trying it in training first.
Question from William. William is asking on about your thoughts on caloric elevations during natural female monthly cycles, specifically in the follicular phase, when we see an increase in insulin sensitivity during the follicular phase.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge area of interest and research, especially because, women are different. They do have to consider some different monthly endocrine disruption. And so, for example, the luteal phase leading up, that would be, optimization of increasing calories and carbohydrates. That's the classic, like your body's going through stress and needs more. In the follicular phase, actually, yeah, like in terms of like decreasing the amount of your insulin sensitivity would go up at that time. So you'd be decreasing the amount of carbohydrates that your body would need at that time. Typically, you can train a bit harder in that period leading up to that. So again, it's not my area of specialty because I work mainly with male clients, but I do think that there's a lot of opportunity, and it's definitely something that I will consider and ask for feedback with, because it is one of those areas too where it's N equals 1. So the individual really matters, like looking at what their specific cycle looks like and making sure that you can kind of optimize that at different times of the month. I've tried it. It's been very efficient for me, kind of working with, okay, this week I can have a little bit more and I need it. And then, in that phase after the cycle, to really optimize that insulin sensitivity and making sure that you can take advantage of maybe, fasting and doing some different interventions from that perspective. Hopefully that answers it.
That was excellent. And I think there's a perfect segue here into our last question from Mark. And this is somewhat related to carbohydrate, also sort of that post-workout window. So Mark is saying, typically there are two camps. You either chug your protein and carbs as soon as you drop the last weight and you down the shake, or others suggest waiting 45 to 60 minutes prior to consume carbs, then to optimize your glycogen repletion. So what side of that camp are you on?
I'm on the depends camp. I know it's surprising, but no, I think the big thing is like looking at, I don't think like the kind of anabolic window has been debunked a lot in research. So it's like, we don't have to chug something within 45 minutes or we're going to lose all of our gains and have, deplete our entire workout. That kind of was what I first thought when I got into the sports. I will fully admit, I was like, oh yeah, I have to have something right away, and it has to have carbs and protein. So when it comes to carbs, like a lot of the carb research is actually for recovery purposes, not necessarily muscle protein synthesis. So it's actually more important to look at the total amount of protein that you're taking in over the entire day. So when I was looking at that window of, 5 hours around your workout, a lot of people will need recovery from a carbohydrate energy perspective. So again, looking at carbohydrates from energy perspective, not necessarily boosting muscle protein synthesis, because a lot of the research is actually more for recovery purposes. So yeah, I would, make sure that you do get some food in within, typically, and there's actually research coming out about fasting afterwards, and kind of, making sure that you can optimize your substrate utilization from that perspective after. But for your question, I would really make sure you look at like the individual situation where it's like, okay, for me, I like, having a real food or a protein shake within an hour, just because I typically will have more carbohydrates at that time in my post-workout meal. But again, it depends on the person, but there's not this secret magic anabolic window where you need to chug a protein shake and be super uncomfortable in this situation. So hopefully that answers your question. I could probably talk about that for an hour or two, but hopefully that answers your question.
These questions have really been amazing, and thanks to everyone that's been participating and interacting both on social media and here in the group chat. What I would say is you have two amazing opportunities beyond this hour that we've spent together. You can absolutely connect with Sylvie, and Sylvie is also going to be putting together, or it has put together, a fantastic nutrition course that is going to integrate a lot of the concepts that she's discussed today. So if you've listened to this hour and it started to create some, movement in your brain and the wheels are turning, don't worry, there's a lot more content coming from Sylvie soon. So you can make sure that you stay connected with us for that information. There's a lot of people in the chat just sending their appreciation and thanks, and thank you to everyone who's attended. We are able to do this because of your participation and interaction, so we very much appreciate that. And I've been loving all of the Instagram posts that have gone up, so thank you, everyone. We are going to wrap up. And please take a screenshot or take out your phone and take a picture of Sylvie's information to be sure that you can stay connected with her and with us at Designs for Sport on Instagram and on Facebook. Thank you very, very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, whatever time it happens to be in whatever place of the world you happen to be in. We very much appreciate all of you, and I look forward to seeing everyone next month. We'll be doing female considerations with Dr. Nicole McClellan, a colleague of Sylvie's. Thanks,
Awesome.
everyone.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.